To hear the full episode, become a patron at patreon.com/deathpanelpod.
Welcome to the Death Panel. Patrons, thank you so much for supporting the show. None of the work that we do would be possible without you. To become a supporter of the show and get access to the second weekly bonus episode, as well as the entire back catalog of bonus episodes, become a patron at patreon.com/deathpanelpod. And to help us out some more, share the show with your friends, post about your favorite episodes, pick up copies of Health Communism, A Short History of Transmisogyny, and Abolish Rent at your local bookstore, or request them at your local library, hold reading or discussion groups, and follow us at deathpanel_. I'm Beatrice Adler-Bolton, and today I'm joined by returning guest and friend of the panel, Kelly Hayes. Kelly is a Menominee author, organizer, movement educator, and photographer. She is the host of Truth Out's podcast Movement Memos, and the creator of Organizing My Thoughts, which is a weekly newsletter about politics and justice work. She is also the co-author of the book Let This Radicalize You with Mariame Kaba, which we had the great honor of discussing in a past episode of Death Panel. And I've asked her on today to talk about a new upcoming book that she edited called Read This When Things Fall Apart, Letters to Activists in Crisis, which is coming out from AK Press in November. Kelly, welcome back to the Death Panel. It's always so nice to get the chance to have you on.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's a joy to be here.
I'm so glad to have you on today to talk about the new book that you edited, which again is called Read This When Things Fall Apart, Letters to Activists in Crisis. I really appreciate this project, and it's a wonderful, sort of strange little book, and I mean that 1000% as a compliment. It struck me as a kind of profoundly necessary work for our times. It kind of arrived right on time. It's a kind of care package for people involved in struggle, activism, and organizing in times that often feel catastrophic. And this isn't just a book to kind of like read in one go and then shelve and forget about, or, you know, it's a book to hold close and to return to and to share with people, with co-strugglers who might be feeling grief or exhaustion or despair. And I mean, Kelly, basically, as you write in the intro, it's sort of to like pull out at 2:00 in the morning when your mind is racing and you can't sleep. And it really is about kind of meeting readers where they are, offering guidance, reflection, and solidarity without ever minimizing the difficulty also of the world that we're navigating. So it features contributions from people like Mariame, Leah Lakshmi, Piamsna Samarasinha, Jane Shi, Stevie Wilson, Ayman Abdelhadi, and Micah Herskind, among many others. And all the contributors offer very intimate and vulnerable letters that share personal strategies or movement lessons for keeping hope and imagination alive when campaigns fail, crises hit, sentences are long or lifelong, and the horrors of the world just sort of press in on us. It creates a kind of sense of dialogue. And in so doing, they model this really interesting form that is as political as it is personal. As Stevie writes at the end of his letter, called Read This If You're a Discouraged, Incarcerated Organizer, quote, I hope these words have strengthened and deepened your commitment to organizing. I hope these words lift and strengthen your spirit. I hope they encourage you to be a menace to our enemies because we need you. We need each other. Together is the only way that we will win. And for me, this book is just a gift in the kind of deepest sense. I found myself returning to passages again and again, not just for like advice, but for a sense that we are in this all together. As Stevie says, you know, that survival and hope are both political acts, that it's restorative, invigorating, and deeply fortifying. And the book really kind of just offers this nice range of like rage and laughter and sorrow, always grounding us again in like the possibility of collective action. So with all that said, I'm really excited to dive into this with you today. And I'm really glad to have you here to unpack the book. Can we start by sort of situating the project for listeners and talk about what the book is, how it came to be, and the intentionality behind the book being a collection of letters? And this is all basically a way to get into like what you hope the book could offer readers.
Thank you for that question. And I love that you called it strange in a complimentary sense, because I think it is a strange kind of a book. We wanted to create something personal. We are living in an era of catastrophe where disasters are unfolding all the time. We wanted to create a care package that could find its way to people on the many fronts of struggle, where people are fighting for each other and for the land and water and caring for each other right now and in the years to come. I wanted the table of contents to read like a crisis directory. Read this. Like, read this if ... you're
break glass
experiencing,
when,
yes,
yeah.
break glass if you're experiencing a particular kind of crisis. And for people to be able to flip to that page and find something helpful and heartfelt from someone who's been where they're at and found a way to carry on. It's definitely no replacement for the active community care we all need. We all need to find our people in these times. But sometimes the person next to us might not know what to say. Maybe they've been stunned into silence by the same impact, or maybe they're just not there at 3 a.m. when the grief or fear or rage in your mind and body is just thundering and you need to feel held. We wanted to
Mm.
make a book that felt like a place people could go for a bit of comfort, insight, and accompaniment. You know, some of it is strategic and some of it is more emotional or even spiritual, but all of it is aimed at helping people cope and helping people stay in our movements and in this world during really difficult times.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think importantly, its approach to helping people cope is in no way paternalistic. And that's important to say, right? That there is a good amount of incompleteness, of, people being really upfront and honest about where they're at. I think Micah's letter is a great example, and Amon's too, where you have these kind of meditations on having to figure it out without having all the answers, right? Where this is really, I think, such a valuable resource for exactly like what you're saying, these moments where regardless of like how deep a community you have around you, no matter how many people are in your life, with things being so constant, not just like recently, but for years now, it's easy to feel sort of so burned out and alone at any moment of the day. And you're not necessarily always going to have your people around you or be, they're not going to necessarily have capacity. And so there's something about this that reminds me of, the kind of genre of the letter as this both like very intimate practice, but is also kind of like a way of like when you read a letter, it's like taking a moment to yourself, right? To kind of think through this dialogue with this person, and it feels very personal and it feels very much like you're not alone in that moment. And, every book arises from a particular context. Obviously, for Read This When Things Fall Apart, part of that context is our current moment. But I'm kind of curious about like what specific conditions, whether like social, political, personal, or structural, that you feel like really made this book necessary. Like, what was the purpose of this project for you? Like, what made you want to bring all these people together to make this text together? Because this could have also been like, a book of 20 letters from Kelly Hayes, right? And it's absolutely not that. It's a very collective endeavor.
Oh, absolutely. It's not something I could have made or would have set out to make on my own. It's very much a labor of love from a group of people, most of whom are dear friends and longtime co-strugglers of mine. And I think that what's special about that book is that it is really woven from that collectivity. Some of these people are people who helped keep me alive and helped keep me in the struggle. I think I mentioned in the opening letter that I met Ash Williams years ago when I was leading a direct action training in a warehouse. And I wound up offering some mentorship to Ash around direct action in the years that followed. And then years later, Ash would be a mentor to me when I became an abortion doula. And so I think that those currents of how we support each other and how we enable each other to do the work and stay in the work, I think they come through in the way that this book is stitched together. No one did this alone. And, I held a lot of labor as the person, sort of as the editor, kind of being responsible for pulling it together, helping people work on their letters. But it feels really weird to kind of speak as a representative of a book that is really the culmination of so many voices. It was a lot easier to talk about Let This Radicalize You because that was me and Miriam. I felt comfortable, and usually it was me and Miriam speaking together about the book. It's like, yeah, these are our thoughts. This is the labor that we did. This is what we think. And this is so much more collective. It's a quilt of sorts.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that I think this group of people decided that this project was necessary, and, we conceived of this before Trump's reelection, well before that. Even before it was clear that we were definitely looking at this current rise of authoritarianism and overt fascism in the federal government, we were staring down a lot of collapse. We were staring down multiple genocides. I think we are under attack in so many ways. Our ability to survive under capitalism was always precarious, especially for disabled people, Black people, Native people, trans folks, migrants, and other marginalized communities. But we are seeing escalations on every front. Some of the conditions we face feel downright apocalyptic, and we can't make it without support. This book is not a roadmap for how we get out of this. And in some ways, I think it's a response to the fact that no such roadmap exists.
Mm-hmm.
Most of us are off the map of our experience. So as people wade through uncharted waters and improvise, waging struggles that sometimes feel impossible, my friends and I felt this pull to rally what we do know how to do and what we can offer people who experience those moments many of us have experienced if we've been in movements long enough that shake us to our core and leave us feeling broken or unable to proceed. Maybe we don't know how the hell to engage in this fight as a disabled person when there's so much ableism in our movements. Maybe we've given it our best and experienced a crushing loss. Maybe a group or relationship that was at the heart of our work comes undone, or the forces we're up against feel unstoppable, or the people we're working with seem impossible and we just want to quit. We started out with the idea of making a zine that consisted of letters to people facing those kinds of moments. And that project blossomed until it was clear that we had a book on our hands.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it really does sort of have the feeling of being something that didn't, it's not like a project where you set out like, we're going to collect this into a book. It feels more like it exists as a book because that's sort of the form it needed to take to be able to reach people, if that makes sense. And I think that really comes across too. And the intimacy of letters also carries a kind of like different weight than essays or analytical writing. And I think that that's also part of the book's wonderful strangeness, essentially. And in the introduction, you write, quote, "Letter writing as a practice can help us hold each other in our humanity and think in less online terms. My sister, for example, will sometimes write me letters in Menominee, our native language. Only about a dozen people speak Menominee fluently, most of them elders. My sister is studying our language as a means of embracing our culture and endeavoring to sustain it. Her letters challenge me to look up the words she is using so that I too might learn more of our language, while also understanding her better. Letters can represent a shared journey." And letters can really offer care and like confrontation and guidance all at once, really kind of bridging these gaps, as I was saying, between writer and reader. And it has like a totally different feeling than a kind of analytical approach. And one of the things that really strikes me about Read This When Things Fall Apart is how the letters function both as this intimate communication, which makes the text sort of feel very approachable, but it's also like an explicitly political gesture. The form invites reflection and response and dialogue, and letters have also like historically been used in movements to sustain connection across distance, whether between organizers and communities or across time between different generations. And you and all the contributors really use this form to make the book feel like a living conversation. Can you talk a little bit about like what made letters feel like the right form for this moment, and how does the personal and kind of almost conversational nature of the letter allow you to reach readers differently than other forms might? Because this could have very easily been, a collection of essays, right? And it's so different just in body and tone than it would have been if it were a book of essays.
I think there's something special about letter writing, something that grounds us in our humanity and our desire to reach for each other. As you say, letter writing has a long history in our movements, from people revealing the truth of their conditions, as some enslaved people did in the U.S. prior to the Civil War, to people building, debating, and complicating ideas together, and maintaining connection where our oppressors would sever it. Letter writing has been an important means of resisting the culture of forgetting, around imprisoned people in the United States and elsewhere. And I am really grateful to Stevie Wilson, a presently incarcerated organizer who contributed to this book and thereby allowed us to bring that legacy of resisting the erasure and severance of connection that carcerality attempts to enforce. I also think this is a moment to really ground ourselves in our humanity at a time when so much communication has been bound up in character limits and decontextualized snippets of who we are and what we mean. And I think there's something really beautiful and important about writing a letter and addressing someone in very human, very personal terms, even if they're a friend or co-struggler you haven't met yet. And I'm particularly concerned in this moment with forms and ideas and ways of communicating that encourage us to reach for each other. I really think that AI chatbots and all of this manufactured sort of personal communication is the end game of capitalist alienation. My friend Sarah Kendzior recently wrote, "It's never too late if you can imagine a way out. That's one reason I strongly oppose AI. It's an assault on the imagination, and we need to be more imaginative than ever." And I would like to think that the letters in this book invite people to imagine a way out alongside us. I think that there is something about a personal letter that allows you to wander into memory and emotion and experience in ways that, the personal essay, you might wind up editing some of these things out, in order to yield to the form, to make it tighter. But in this case, it really is about what's at the heart of this communication, about what we're trying to convey, about what it is to be alive and to take care of each other and to not give up in very specific conditions. And so, yeah, I think that letters were the only way that this book made sense.
Absolutely. And the book, speaks directly to readers who are exhausted and grieving and feeling despair. And the point is to not just offer solace, but the contributors all offer very concrete ways to continue living and struggling in the sort of words of Death Panel to stay alive another week, reminding them of possibility of connection, the continuity of struggle. And when we had you on with Miriam to talk about Let This Radicalize You, we talked a little bit about this, and I wonder if we can sort of revisit that a little bit today, just about how you personally navigate those same moments of overwhelming grief, because I feel like knowing you and the way that you approach things, it definitely taught me a lot about exactly why the book is sort of constructed in the way that it is in this very collective response.
I am really anchored by my relationships. I am in relationship with a lot of amazing people around my city and around the country who I can turn to in a crisis and ask for advice or support or to help me figure out a way forward. That, more than anything, helps tether me to the work I do and to the world itself. I know that no matter what happens, and really bad things do happen, I am not going to face anything alone. And that didn't happen easily or overnight. I came into this work really traumatized, angry, and sarcastic. I swung back hard and fast and easily when I felt hurt. And it took time for me to register that sometimes when something hurt, it wasn't because I had been treated unjustly. It also took time for me to learn how to be constructive when someone had actually fucked up. All of that was part of a process, learning how to experiment with trust, learning how to invest in people, knowing they would sometimes let me down, learning how to build with people I didn't like or understand, and sometimes being surprised by what grew between us. I am a person who has found their people again and again, and that has allowed me to keep organizing, to keep living, to find my way back when I felt I couldn't do this anymore. And I want to name that I know not everyone who is engaged with movements has found their people, and that some people have experienced a lot of hurt or alienation in their justice work, maybe more of that than togetherness. And that's really hard. Ruth Wilson Gilmore says that freedom is a place and that it's the place we make. She also says that where life is precious, life is precious. I think finding our people and creating bonds between people who really live and breathe the work of making life precious in a world that tries to make it cheap is so foundational to the kind of placemaking that not only has the potential to free us, but also creates the conditions that make our continued struggle and survival possible. And on that note, I really want to shout out Ash Williams' letter in the book about finding your people, which is really beautiful and something I think a lot of people will relate to.
To hear the full episode, become a patron at patreon.com/deathpanelpod. You'll get access to this and the rest of our catalog of patron-only episodes, and be the first to get a new patron episode every Monday when it drops. With love, the Death Panel.